In Curse of Strahd, as your player's characters traverse the winding roads of Barovia between settlements, you as the DM are meant to roll on random encounter tables to see what monsters or other things they find on their travels. The random encounter tables in the books are pretty solid. It's a classic standard monsters and the kind of things you expect in Barovia, such as wolves, druids, berserkers, scarecrows. Some of them are hints to other places they might go to later. In the early stages of the campaign, when your players may be like levels 3 or 4, some of the encounters can be really challenging. I mean, there's werewolves, as one example. But as they reach level 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and get towards the end of the campaign, some of those encounters are going to be pretty trivial. I mean, a druid and a couple of twig bites are not going to do really well against a level 9 party, for example. Now, part of this, I think, is kind of by design. It shows to the players that they are stronger and they're more ready to take down Strahd and his castle. But there are DMs like me who, at that point of the game, want to think, well, there's so many monsters available in things like Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and Monsters of the Multiverse and Famisher's Guide to Ravenloft, that it would be nice to throw something a bit more challenging, a little more different. And the beautiful thing is there's so many stat blocks out there, and there's loads that are relevant to Barovia, the Domains of Dread and the Shadowfell. So what I'm going to do in this video today is I'm going to share with you a few resources for random encounters that I've come across, including my favourite, and 7 monsters for alternative random encounters in Barovia. Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mist, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. And this is a Curse of Strahd video because we're talking about random encounters in Barovia. As I said in the intro, this video is going to offer a few resources for random encounters, which could be a good way to find even more beyond the 7 I'm going to suggest later, and give some monster ideas that I think are really fitting, most of which I sprung on my players and ended up being pretty fun. Let's go straight to the resources then. These are all available in DM's Guild. Some of them are pay what you want. Some of them are just a few dollars each. My absolute favourite though is probably the priciest, and it's called Barovian Knights 101 Ravenloft Encounters. Now, the moment you see that it's, well, it might be different if you're watching this when there's a sale on or what have you, but the moment you see that it's $8, you might think, no thanks. That was my reaction too when I first saw it. I got a few other DM's Guild Barovian Random Encounter resources, which I'll mention in a minute and link to in the description. And I found that some of the others were good. They had a couple of suggestions I liked, but this one, out of the 101 suggestions, I probably could have easily have used 10 or 20, if not more. I do think it's honestly the best. And I just want to stress, I'm not the guy who created it. I don't know the guy who created it. I'm saying all this because I recommended it on Facebook once and the person assumed that I was either the person who made it or was a friend of theirs. I have no affiliation with them. I'm just a fan. I think it's fantastic and I heavily recommend it. And most of the monsters that, if not all of them, that I'm going to suggest later on are from this resource or mentioned in this resource, and I either used them as suggested or tweaked them a little. But I'd also like to give honourable mentions to some others I checked out as well. There's the Curse of Strahd Companion to the Lands of Barovia. That's by Wyatt Troll, for people who know The Wedding of Ravenloft. And I believe he's now got a Curse of Strahd Companion Complete Edition. I'll include a link for that as well. But this is essentially, I'm assuming it's one of the chapters that you can just buy individually. And I don't know if the Complete Edition also improves on it or if it's exactly the same, I don't know. Another one I encountered, no pun intended, was additional random encounters for Curse of Strahd, Barovia random encounters on the Old Svalich Road, and Encounters in the Mists, additional random encounters for Dungeon Masters. I read all of these. Like I said, some of them are free or pay what you want. Some of them are just a couple of dollars. I got them all and got some good stuff out of each of them. But as I said, Barovian Nights is my favourite. And because it's called Barovian Nights, it makes me want to start singing Arabian Nights from Aladdin, but with the lyrics changed. I'd love to do a parody of that, but I've heard horror stories of what Disney are like cracking down on copyright, even if it is parody. I don't know enough about legalities of stuff to know if that's okay. Maybe I don't know, do a song at some point. One thing I should say about the DM's Guild resources as well is I finished running Curse of Strahd about 2 years ago. So I've not really looked at more recent guides or resources or supplements that cover random encounters in Barovia. All the ones I mentioned are a couple of years old now. If you know of a really good one, please drop a comment, let me know. I'd be keen to see it. Maybe I'll buy it or download it if it's pay what you want. I'll probably chuck them some money. I'm one of these people, I don't like just, even if it's pay what you want available for free, I don't like taking it for free. I like to give at least a couple of dollars as a thanks. Maybe I'll review it and take a look and maybe do a second video with these. Okay, moving on to 7 monsters I would suggest throwing in to your CoS of Strahd campaign. So these are 7 encounters, all 7 of them are monsters, so they're all combat encounters. I know that combat encounters aren't the only types of random encounters, they're also non-combat random encounters, but for the purposes of this, I'm just going to do all-out combat. I'd like to explain as well, D&D Beyond recently made a change to how you could buy things on its website. I used to love the fact that you could buy an individual monster or an individual magic item from an adventure or a setting book and not have to buy like the whole lot. And you could even buy like the monster bundle, all the monsters from it at a discounted rate, rather than having to buy the entire book or pay lots of money for lots of individual ones. A few weeks ago, before recording this, they changed how they did things on their website, and now you can't do that anymore. You have to, if you wanted one monster from one book, you've now got to buy the whole thing, which I think, I'm not the only one who's upset about it. I think a lot of DMs are upset about it. So originally when I was planning this video, I was originally thinking of having, one of these 7 monsters is each from a different source, and that would have been easy enough to sort out from somewhere like D&D Beyond, but now that makes it a headache. So you'll be pleased to know that the majority of these are the majority of them are actually from just one book, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. But if you have Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse, they're in there as well because they got updated in that. So hopefully, if you've got one of those two, you've got access to the majority of these. There's also one from Volo's Guide to Monsters, but that also got updated in Monsters of the Multiverse. There's one from the Monster Manual, which I'm assuming you probably have. And there's one from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, which I know a lot of CoS of Strahd DMs have, regardless of if they're doing a wider Ravenloft campaign or not, which I'm actually doing. I'm doing a whole Ravenloft post-CoS of Strahd Ravenloft campaign sequel, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, I'm going to start as well. I'm not going to save the best till last, I'm going to save the best till first. Is that a saying? And I'm going to tell you my absolute favourite one. 2 of my players told me this is one of the most memorable, one of their favourite combat encounters in the entire of CoS of Strahd. Bearing in mind they obviously went most places, and you wouldn't expect something on the Svalich Road between one destination and another to be this popular, but it was. And we're going to start off with a corpse flower. Corpse flowers are in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, updated in Monsters of the Multiverse. A corpse flower is a large plant that essentially has zombies inside of it, or corpses, I suppose. And it can do some interesting things with those corpses. It can either prop them out as minions, so you can have like the corpse flowers and a bunch of zombies with it, or it can actually like self-heal by absorbing the corpse, which is pretty rad. It's also got a stench of death ability, which means people close to it might be poisoned, but then they're immune to it if they pass. And it can make 3 tentacle attacks, and they're pretty heavy attacks. It's a challenge rating 8. I believe it's actually, out of all 7 monsters, the toughest, plus you're chucking a few zombies as well. Could be quite a tricky one. For flavour, I said it was one of the Barovian druids' experiments, for lack of a better word, that had gone amok. And I said that the zombies looked like the druids they encountered in the winery, and yes, the hell. I introduced this at a point after they'd been to those places. And I believe it's in Barovian Nights that it says, if you want to make it even freakier, make it hover. Give it a hover speed and just have it float towards the players very slowly while these zombies are coming in with it. I think that's really cool. Number 2, Woad. Woads originally appeared in Volo's Guide to Monsters and were updated in Monsters of the Multiverse. I threw this at one of my players later on, alongside a few of the Barovian Berserkers. I thought that kind of made sense. And it nearly killed one of my players. One of my players, a wizard, cast a fire spell on it, and I played it. It was really, really angry that this thing had basically hurt it a lot using, it's vulnerable to fire, used this fire ability, and wanted revenge and kept attacking it even though when he was down. So he was like down to death saving throws, but luckily got revived and Woad got defeated. It's got some cool abilities. One of which I think I'll mention is Tree Stride. Once on each of its turns, the Woad can use 10 feet of its movement to magically step into one living tree with 5 feet of it and emerge from a second living tree within 60 feet of it that they can see. It's going to essentially teleport between trees. So I placed this, I think it was not far out of Van Richten's tower in the northwestish part of the map. where obviously if you look at the map, it's got like a lot of trees around there, and I think I found a random encounter battle map where there were like trees literally like alongside the road, and so it could like attack between those. Number 3, a Mimic. So a Mimic is classic D&D monster. It's from the monster manual. The idea I have here is that it disguises itself as one of the signposts in the areas that are essentially crossroads. If memory serves, there's 3 of these. There's River Ivlis, I don't know how you pronounce it, which is area F. That's near Sirpool encampment. There's the Lunar River Crossroads, area P, that's just west of Vallaki. Or there's the Raven River Crossroads, area R, to the west of area P, kind of on the way to like Kresk, the winery and places like that. I think it's more likely you're going to use it in the latter 2 locations, because rather than like spring it on them really early in the campaign at River Ivlis. And once they've done Village of Barovia and Sirpool encampment, unless something unusual or different or what have you happens in your campaign that encourages your players to go back to those locations, it's unlikely they're going to go back there. In my game, I had a reason they had to revisit the Village of Barovia, and they revisited Madame Eva at least once more, if not twice. But I think if it ends up being the other crossroads, they're all west of Vallaki, it's the west side of the map, that's places they're going to be going to loads. And what you could do is the first time they go through there, they see the signposts, I think in one of the places it's broken. Maybe the next time they go through there when they're a higher level, they see that the signpost is moved. Maybe you mention that as the DM, and when one of them goes to move it, they're like, my hand's stuck to it. Uh-oh. And it's a Mimic. Number 4, an Allip. These are in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, Monsters of the Multiverse. Their flavor text says that they are tied to secrets, that are powerful beings protected the mighty curse. That screams one thing to me: Amber Temple. Maybe the Allip. Allips aren't in Amber Temple by default, but you could potentially have this thing wandering around. It's escaped from the Amber Temple. Perhaps it's a tie-in and a lead to the Amber Temple. I think their art is amazing. I think their attacks are amazing. They have 3 main attacks. They can just do a sort of standard melee spell attack for a ton of psychic damage called Maddening Touch. Howling Babble, which is a recharge on a 6. Each creature within 30 feet. Wisdom save, or they take psychic damage and they're stunned. And Whispers of Compulsion is pretty cool. It chooses 3 creatures it can target within 60 feet. Each target makes a wisdom saving throw, takes psychic damage, which uses reaction to make a melee weapon attack against a creature of Allip's choice that the Allip can see. So it's a bit like, for those of you who play like Final Fantasy games, a bit like Confuse condition, where just, oh no, you're now hitting your allies. I think that's really cool. Number 5, Skulk. These have a very low challenge rating, they're only a half, but I think they are super, super freaky. They're in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, updated in Monsters of the Multiverse, and I think there's a good place you can put these. It kind of depends on circumstances, and it ultimately depends on if your players do the Werewolf Den. Now I changed the Werewolf Den's captives from all being children to mostly being adults with 1 child, and this could still work. But if you have your players rescue the children from the Werewolf Den and they take them to either Kresk or Vallaki even more so if you've introduced the orphanage in Vallaki, which I think is a Mandy mod idea, then this could work really well, because the way Skulks work is they can only be seen in one of 3 ways. They can be seen by the light of a candle made of fat rendered from a corpse whose identity is unknown. What? I mean, that's cool and pretty gnarly, but it's just, that's a very specific thing, right? And what if suddenly the identity of the corpse is known? It's like, does it still work anyway? Children who are age 10 and under can see through the invisibility. So the cool thing about this is, like in my game, there was 1 child who was then being escorted to Vallaki from the Werewolf Den. And I think I planted this at the crossroads by Vallaki, and he basically screamed, look, there's a monster over there. And I explained to the players that when they looked, there was nothing there. And then he was like, no, look, it's there, it's coming. And then, of course, your players have got to try and attack it. It's invisible. Maybe they have see invisibility, the spell. But if they don't, the monsters, if you introduce more than 1 Skulk, which I probably recommend because they're quite weak hit point-wise, the Skulks will have advantage on their attacks against the PCs and NPCs, and any attacks against the Skulks are with disadvantage because they can't see them properly. If, say, someone like Richten or Esmeralda is with the party, given that they're monster hunters, maybe they're familiar with Skulks, The third way they can be seen is through a reflective surface, such as a mirror. So then they might say, get a mirror out if you've got a mirror. It seems like a weird thing to say, but I do, I think mirrors are pretty standard thing. I think that you can buy from a shop as adventuring gear. I think it might appear in some of the kits you can buy or start with as your starting gear. So it's not out of the realms of possibility that one of the players has got a mirror and goes, oh, I've got a mirror, and is able to see them that way. Number 6, the Lost, also known as Lost Sorrowsworn. Mordenkainen's Tome of Monsters of the Multiverse. This is described as being a sort of very Shadowfell type monster. And essentially, this monster's kind of lost in the mists. What I did was a very specific thing. So I went a bit off rules as written with what happened to the Vlachoviches with the coup in Valaki. Instead of all of them being killed, I had Victor escape. Now, I can't remember where I got this idea from. I'd love to credit who it was. Kudos to whoever it was, because I think it was awesome. Victor's teleportation circle didn't work for the 2 servants, which is why in the book, that's why they disappear. In the book, they die, essentially. And Victor manages to tinker and tweak the teleportation circle a bit more, and when the coup happens and the Burgomaster's mansion is stormed, in a panic, he dives into the teleportation circle, and it works for him without killing him, but he's essentially just sort of teleported all across Barovia. Every few seconds, he's teleported there and there and there. And I had one point where, I think it was during the old Bone Grinder fight, which my players did later on, they didn't do it before doing Valaki, he just appeared and was like, what's going on? And then just disappeared again. It was really cool. And then I had it that eventually they found him outside Van Richten's tower, where one of the times he teleported right by its anti-magic field, fell into it, and then was too terrified to leave the radius of it in case he started teleporting again. Now, the reason I'm telling you all this is because what happened is he stayed at the tower for a while, and then one of the times my players were about to leave the tower, 2 monsters approached them, which were the Lost Sorrowsworn. I had it as flavour that they were the 2 missing servants, and essentially what happened with Victor's teleportation circles, instead of killing them or disintegrating them, if that's what I think that's what happens, if I remember correctly, they were essentially taken to the mists and then transformed into these monstrosities. And I even had it that, actually in the stat block it says they can speak common, but to make it extra creepy, I said that they could only speak deep speech, and only one of my PCs could speak deep speech, and I had it that they were trying to say something, and this one player, I was like, you hear what they say, and it's essentially Master Victor. And my player was like, oh, right. That's freaky. Anyway, to the point, they are pretty brutal. I had 2 of them, and their challenge rating 7. I started them at a distance. They don't have any ranged attacks. So what I did is I started them from a distance to give the players a chance to maybe do a round or 2 where they fire some ranged attacks. But then my player who played a fighter literally just dashed right up to them and then very nearly got killed thanks to its embrace attack, which is pretty lethal. It ends up in being like a grapple and you're frightened, and then it does, as well as doing a huge chunk of damage when it first hits, they take psychic damage at the end of each of its turns while they're grappled as well. One of the PCs nearly died, 2 failed death saves I think it was, and then luckily someone was just in range to heal them and bring them back. And then at that point the Lost Sorrowsworn was heading more in the direction of the tower anyway. An idea I had as well, which I thought would be a bit cheeky, was if the players decided to retreat inside the tower, and I think that was probably what Victor was going to do. I think Victor was actually still in the tower, is that they would just mindlessly try and walk into the tower and into the door, and that could have triggered the lightning effect, the lightning trap on the tower, and potentially risk bringing the tower down. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool one. And then number 7, this one's from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. This is a Gallows Speaker. I love the art for this. And it's flavor text. It says they arise from places of mass death or sites where creatures regularly meet their doom. The idea for this was if the players ever needed an opportunity to go back to either Village of Barovia or Circle Encampment, it could be the crossroads where the gallows are, and it can rise there. And it could potentially, if you want it to have some minions, maybe the graves there. It raises, I don't think it has this ability, but you could just say it does, or this one has minions and it just brings some skeletons to life as well from some of the graves. This one's got a really cool attack, as well as a melee spell attack. It's got a attack where a creature within 30 feet of it must make wisdom saving throw. On a failed save, it takes psychic damage, And then painful memories leap from that target to up to 3 other creatures of the Gallows Speaker's choice within 30 feet of the target, and they take psychic damage too. And a really cool thing I saw in one of the comments on this was somebody said, if you've got loads of player characters who have high wisdom scores, and it's that frustrating thing if they almost always pass, target someone with a low whiz, and then the people with the high whiz could be the 3 people the Gallows Speaker chooses, so they take the damage as well. I thought that was a really clever thing that you can do, and a way for them to take damage in a way that they may not necessarily do so otherwise. Thinking of things that like have a high AC and have strong wisdom saving throws, it might be a nice way to actually hurt those PCs. And that's it. Let me know what you think. Oh, one final thing I wanted to mention as well is I'm a big fan, again, not affiliated, don't know the guy other than buying his products. I'm a big fan of the monsters know what they're doing. There's some books and there's some blogs. I believe every monster I've talked about here is covered. The second book covers Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes and the Volo's Guide to Monsters. They'll be covered in there. And then I believe on his blog, when Monsters of the Multiverse came out, he looked at the updated versions and gave comments on those as well. So whether you're using the original versions or the more updated versions of Monsters of the Multiverse, you should be covered. And I think he's done Van Richter's Guide to Ravenloft monsters as well, so he probably covers the Gallows Speaker. Again, just a fan. And I found that using this book / blog, these books / blog has really helped me to run monsters a lot smarter. And I think that's it for this one. Thank you for watching. If this is your first video of mine you've seen, I've already done about a dozen videos so far, and half of them are Ravenloft videos, so like link to Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, the source book for the Ravenloft setting, and I'm currently running a post-Curse of Strahd Ravenloft campaign that goes beyond level 10 at the moment, so in some of the videos I talk about how I ran certain domains. But for Curse of Strahd videos, what have I got coming up? I want to do the music of Curse of Strahd and play a video that covers all the music I liked, the music that I used. I want to do a video that talks about when it's best to introduce Strahd. I think there's 2 really good times to introduce him for the first time in front of your players. And I got a whole bunch more ideas as well. I think we'll talk about how to handle TPKs and a few others as well. I guess if you want to see what else there is in the future, please do all the classic YouTube stuff. Please subscribe and all that jazz. Thank you, Miss Wanderers.